Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'm going to be doing a follow-up video to the video I did just the other day about how Wonder Woman 1984, though it has passed $100 million worldwide, is at this point likely set to lose up to around $200 million at the box office. Now, I have to put some caveats in there, but before I do, please be sure to smash the like button, smash the rumble button. I upload these videos onto Minds Plus as well. Thank you very much for that support. So, let me go ahead and dive into this. I mentioned briefly in the video that I did the other day about how I used to do extensive box office tracking. I would compare this to other films. I would say, hey, after the first 2 weeks, this is typically what a film tends to make. And I kind of laid off of that a little bit because, one, we were in COVID era, and two, we also did not have a lot of films coming out, especially big budget films that would actually meet up to the standards that most films tend to do. So I decided to put the numbers in for Wonder Woman 1984 because I think there's actually a decent chance that the numbers that I am projecting here might actually be reached, especially when you compare it to how well or how not as well this film is doing in comparison to a film like Tenet, which came out even at a more difficult time when it comes to the movie theaters in general. And so we're going to be going back. We're going to be going back in time a little bit because guess what we're going to be bringing up, everybody? That's right, the box office tracking number sheet. Yes, I know every single one of you loved it. I know that you all love numbers. You all love math. You all love percentages, but this is something that you can actually access yourself. I have a website. It's ombreviews.home.blog. It's a place where I was originally trying to have it be kind of a alternative to Rotten Tomatoes, and some people were utilizing it, but some others weren't, and I was trying to put a little too much time into it. I think got kind of burnt out on it. However, box office tracking is one where it's very easy to keep it up to date because the numbers are just there, and all I need to do is put in the raw data, and then the other columns basically calculate themselves and update in real time. So it's a lot easier for me to keep up with that, especially if I'm only doing it once a week and updating the numbers as they come in. But I've also decided to start doing some more things. So if you want to see some movie reviews, some very quick movie reviews where it's literally just the grade, dating back now to 2013, 2014 as the time of this video. I have that on the site as well. If you just go up to the top, you'll see they got film reviews right here, and boom, right there. Okay, up to 2014. And so this will list all the films that I saw in that year with their grades, and films from the year that I have not seen yet, or maybe only saw one time and kind of want to see all over again. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive into the math on this. So as I mentioned, Wonder Woman 1984 made $118.5 million as of this past weekend, and that is based off of the first 2 weeks of its theatrical release. That's after having an $85 million opening weekend, which was pretty solid during the midst of a pandemic. But you can see between those two numbers that that is a huge drop-off. Again, $85 million, and then you only make another 40 million or so in the next week. That is a huge drop off. Again, about 50% drop off when you look at it from a worldwide perspective, around a 65+% drop off when you look at it from, or rather 67% drop off when you look at it from just the domestic marketplace, which would be the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Or actually, even I think just the United States and Canada at this point. But that is still something that is not nearly as impressive as other films have been in the past. Now, some caveats here. Now, this is tracking that I would normally use during a regular year. This was something that I figured out after looking at several films, breaking down the numbers, breaking down the data. If you want to actually see how I got to this process, if you go back to videos from like a couple years ago when I started to kind of figure this stuff out, saying, wait a minute, if you look at these numbers here and you look at their second weekends, you can actually kind of really predict a pretty accurate range about what the film will probably do, whether it is doing very well, has good legs, or whether it has really bad legs, right? Some people have found simpler ways of doing it with, multipliers and things like that. And I understand that and I respect that to a point. However, I do think mine gives a better sense of a range. And since I've been tracking this stuff, it's very rare that a film actually falls outside of this range. So the caveat here is that we are obviously not in normal times. We are in COVID era times. And so therefore, there's a very good chance that these numbers could be off, that it could possibly, I think, if this is going to be off at all, I think that the film Wonder Woman 84 could make more. But especially based on the fans' reaction, based on audience reaction, I don't know if this film is going to have nearly as good of legs as other films have had in the past. And so let's go ahead and dive into these numbers. So as you can see, 118.5 million after 2 weeks. So this is based on the projections. Let's assume that as of this week, right, as of the second week of its opening, let's say that it's already made 70% of what it could make, right? Let's assume that this is 70%, meaning that it's already made the vast majority of what it could possibly make. If that is the case, and there are some films that will fall into this category, which is why it is there. It's, again, this is the minimum projection. This is the minimum amount of money that this film is likely to make. then the minimum amount would be $169.2 million. That would be a huge loss for them, which is why it's less likely to happen. Now, what is the best case scenario in most circumstances? Again, most of the time, a film, if they fall around the 50% marker, might be, again, 48 to 51, 52%. So the number will be very similar to what we see here. So the max that this film could make, again, this is normal era stuff, so obviously this number could be wrong, but it's still, I think, a good indicator, especially when you look to a film like Tenet, which made over $300 million worldwide, and this film is underdoing and underpacing Tenet, which means it should make less than that. This number here actually makes a lot more sense, which is the reason why I'm even bringing it up in the first place. So the max that this film likely will make is around $237 million. And again, that's assuming that the $118.5 million is 50% of what it is set to make up to this point. Again, this is all about predictions, and predictions can obviously be off by numbers here and there, but it's still interesting to look at nonetheless. And let's say what the more likely scenario is, the average of that number is, and that would be 203.1. And so again, somewhere between basically 237 and 169 million, that is the range of what this film is likely to make. And if you go ahead and look at these films and look at the films that I've tracked before, again, I have a lot of films on here, you can actually see just how accurate that is and how most of the time it's going to fall within that range. And if it falls out of it, it was a exceptional circumstance where the film just did better than anyone could have ever anticipated. The legs were insanely good, where it just kept doing well week after week after week. And you'll see that it's still not too far off from what that range was in the first place. Normally it does better. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into some more numbers here from Wonder Woman 84. So the film cost around $200 million. Again, that's the projected, that's what they've told us, right? That is the reported budget for the film. If you take into account normal spending when it comes to the marketing campaign, typically speaking, you multiply this by 1.5, and that will get you the total spending. That includes marketing and includes production, etc. If that is indeed the case, and again, this number could be more or could be less. These are estimates. That would mean that in all likelihood, this film costs probably around $300 million altogether when you take those things into account. So now comparing the cost, the total cost of this movie to how much money this film is likely going to make, we can then also make some predictions as far as how much the film will make or how much the film will lose. And it is not looking good for this film to make any money. Now, also, one other caveat, this does not include HBO Max subscription fees, because we really can't figure that number because they are not releasing those numbers on a weekly basis. Also, subscriptions could easily be included that are people that are not wanting to watch Wonder Woman 84, but just wanting to get the service to watch something else. And so it's a really hard metric to throw into this. And it also means that you could potentially have a lot of the money that we're going to talk about as potential loss be made back through that and through other deals and other arrangements with other companies, as most of these studios tend to do, right? They tend to have other revenue streams and not just the box office. So again, this is just looking at it from a purely box office standpoint, but it is still going to be a massive amount of money that they have to make up through these other deals if that is indeed the case. So I'm projecting that the minimum gain loss, meaning essentially the in this case, it would be the worst case scenario. The max amount of money this film is set to lose. That's, again, going back to the previous numbers. This is assuming that it only makes $169.2 million max. I don't think it'll reach that number, but let's say it did. That would mean that it's in the red, $198 million. Now, how do I get to that number? Well, you don't just subtract it from $300 million. You have to keep into account that when you talk about box office, right, that's $118.5 million. They do not get 100% of that. The studios have to split that with theaters. They usually have better differences between themselves and American theaters. Normally, they can get, opening weekend around 90% of the box office revenue. That's typically how they work it. Whereas in China, for instance, it's really bad. They only get 40% of the revenue entirely. So the vast majority of that stays in China. But when you take all of these things into account, based on my research, typically films are said to have made, or studios are said to have made around 60% or so. Again, around that number, a rough estimate of the entire box office. And so if you take 60% of this number, this is the current number that we have right now. So right now, it is in the red for $228 million. Again, when you compare in what they're actually making, again, the 60% cut of what they've actually made thus far, which even in of itself is a problem because this is not including the wide range and the longer legs of films and getting more money we're getting less money down the line, which is the reason why this is, again, an estimate of what likely we can see. And so that is the current loss, $228 million. So let's say that it goes on track and makes just a little bit more money. $198 million loss is going to be the worst case scenario for this film. So what's the best case scenario? What is the most likely, or what would be the best thing that Warner Brothers could hope for this film? Based on my estimates, the best case scenario is that they only lose $157 million. That's by the max gain, max loss, right? So what is the best case scenario for them? That would be this number right here, which is abysmal. Now, again, you can say, okay, but it'll make some of that up through HBO Max, and maybe there's going to be other revenue streams, and obviously down the road, 4K, Blu-ray sales. But when you look at the fact that a lot of people, a lot of the regular audience members are not big fans of this film, do not have a lot of nice things to say about it, it seems to indicate then at this point that they are very likely not going to buy those Blu-rays and 4Ks down the line, which means it will not be as successful on home media as the first Wonder Woman was, because that one actually did well in theaters and after the fact. And so therefore, it's going to be that much more difficult for them to be able to get this amount of money. Keep in mind, too, it's only on HBO Max for another, 20 days or so. Again, it's only on there for a month. They take it off of HBO Max, and then it'll be only in theaters and probably video on demand. So they'll make some money probably from that, too. But think about it. Most people, if they really wanted to watch this film, would have gotten a free trial of HBO Max or would have found some way to watch it, right? And so therefore, the likelihood of them getting extra money or a lot of extra money from people waiting to spend $30 to watch it from home, whereas they could have seen it for much cheaper at a movie theater, or they could have just gotten HBO Max and gotten access to other films and other TV shows in the process, just doesn't seem likely that they're going to get $157 million worth to make up for it. And again, that is the best case scenario in this instance, which means you're going to find somewhere between a loss of $198 million and $157 million, the average of that being $178 million. So this is going to be a major financial loss for them. Anyone trying to spin it of, oh man, we're already signing on to Wonder Woman 3 and it's going to be fantastic and it's made so much money, $100 million is nothing to snuff at. When you break down the actual numbers, when you take in marketing, take in the actual budgetary cost, and you take into the account that they don't get 100% of the box office receipts, and again, based on the numbers that we had just this past weekend, have them at $118 million worldwide, this is something that at the end of the day, we cannot simply ignore. And for anyone to try and ignore this, I think would be a major, major mistake. So if you want to follow along this journey, I might try and update this to have tenets. Obviously, I don't know if I can have the Tenet week 1, week 2 totals. I can hopefully try and find a Deadline article that dates back to then, so that way I can see just how close it was, but I can actually break it down to show you just how much money, because Tenet was indeed a financial loss, because that film had to make essentially the same amount of money that this film did, because it cost around the same amount of money as well. However, it did a little bit better than what Wonder Woman right now is projected to make. And remember, take these numbers with a grain of salt, do your own math, do your own work on this, but again, you can check my work yourself, you can check it compared to all the other films that have been made. Again, just kind of give you an example of this. So Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Sonic the Hedgehog, based on the fact that it made $202 million by the end of its second weekend, I projected that it was going to be between $289 and $405.9 million, and it ended up around $306 million. And so it fell within that range, right? It fell within that range overall. And again, very, very impressive for it to have done so at that point. But I'm trying to see here. So yeah, it looks like I had projected that it would get anywhere between, as far as financial gain, between $31 million and $101 million in actual raw profits. And so it made a fair amount of money there, getting at $306 million. So again, below the max estimate, but definitely above the minimum, and, just slightly below the average for what was expected for that movie. So again, it did very well, but that's just one example of how, again, the math does work where the range is normally going to be correct. The one example I can think of, so some might be wondering, what is an example of a film where maybe you got it wrong? Well, Knives Out was one that most people did not think would ever have done as well as it did. That film, by the end of its second week, had made $142 million. So my range was between $199 million and $142 million. So as far as the max and the minimum goes. So again, $199 million. That film ended up making, let me make sure that I have the right category here. This is the only problem that I have so far with this, is that it's sometimes hard to do in this capacity. So anyway, this film, and again, I don't think I had actually followed, $306 million that ended up making. And so, yeah, as you can see, I was actually incredibly wrong on that one. But when you look to that, again, I was around $100 million off on that one. And the reason why, though, is because no one expected this film to do as well. This film was making money weeks and weeks and weeks after. This is one of the few exceptions that falls outside of this range. Most of the other films will fall into it. But as I also said, this is a very rare circumstance because this film obviously is coming out during COVID era and movie theaters and different release dates. And again, the international numbers are not nearly as trustworthy because if you have a more staggered release where it's not coming out in the vast majority of foreign countries at the same time, the number can obviously be different. But again, wanted to be honest and wanted to be straightforward with you guys. But what are your thoughts about this? Let me know if you think that this film will be a massive financial loss. Again, I think probably $150 million at least. In my video, I said $50 to $100 million, so it looks like it'll be even worse than that. So let me know your thoughts about that. And also, check out the website. Let me know what you think about it. Again, obviously, I've changed a couple of things. I'm not going to be able to keep up with the scores as much. I do have now a live score for Wonder Woman 84. So I think this is based off of a few reviews right now. So as you can see right now, 59.3, not very good, means that this is essentially in the D range, right? It's in the DC range. And that, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that actually works. I like my scoring system. If you want to find out what all these numbers need and what omjom and subjom mean, go check out the website. You can find out more information about that there. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the bell notification, smash the rumble button if you're watching over there. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my January 2021 Patreon and Subscribe Star members: Albertus Magnus, Ali C83, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator Brian P, Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, The Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jay, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Laura Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his beautiful twin with the beautiful hair, Orange Hat Reviews, On to June, Out of Step with Reality, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Steve Glasker, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And also a huge shout out to my Subscribe Star peeps: Stan for John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nevedon G. Adams, and ZK Man. You guys are all freaking amazing. Thank you so very much for being supporters. If you want your name shouted out, please consider joining on Patreon, where for $1 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. For $5 a month, you get access to that, and also you get access to exclusive giveaways, where I give away 4Ks, Blu-rays, digital codes, etc. $10 a month will get you all that, plus also access to a special podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Lots of fun. We do Q&As from that as well, so you get access to asking those Q&As, asking us any wide variety of questions. And for $25 a month, you get all of that stuff, plus you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream. And also for that first month, you get a free t-shirt shipped anywhere throughout the world. So if you want to consider any of those things, please check out the links in the description below, where you can find my Subscribe Star and Patreon, and also other ways to support the channel. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.